Well, Roberta, welcome. Welcome to my library.
Thanks so much, Your Grace. Yeah.
When was the last time you were in here?
It was about 5 years ago, and or more than that, and the glebe was like still very much under renovation at that time. So it's wonderful to see it all finished. It's looking absolutely beautiful, and
It's great. And I invited you here because this is kind of a space that I enjoy being in.
Yeah.
But it's really about providing you and people that you, in a sense, represent, the opportunity to ask questions about where we're going, our pastoral letter, and our opening of a new pastoral year, which will begin, in fact, it's already begun, but we will formally begin our pastoral year in our October regional meetings.
Right.
And so there are questions, and here we are. So let's have the conversation that will help, hopefully, as many people as possible.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much for the invitation to share some questions. And, I think it's been quite a journey and an exciting journey in the last year and really more since we've been working on transformation the year before last and then working with your pastoral letter last year and on the journey of Lord, where are you going? And all the data that we collected, our explorations of ministries last year. I think the thing that stands out the most for me from being with the St. Mary's faith community is the fellowship and the exploration that we did together last year, especially in the Lenten sessions, all the kind of discovery that we've done together. And so I was wondering what your thoughts were about that, Your Grace, like what we've discovered, where we've been so far in this last year.
Well, it's been an amazing journey.
Yeah.
We've had a journey of renewal of our church that began, yes, quite some time ago. But more formally, about a year ago, when we launched the pastoral letter, Lord, where are you going? That question didn't just appear out of nowhere. That came as a result of prayer and reflection, struggle, my own struggle. I even indicated that when we launched the letter. But that letter was launched to try to get us to reflect as a local church. And I think many have responded and have done some amazing things in the past year. Just reflecting on some of the statistics that I glanced at.
Yeah.
We have some amazing information in those statistics. Over 50 parishes took up the task of discerning, of questioning, of looking at themselves. It's not an easy thing to do because, often we get used to going to church, and church is where we go to on Sunday, and we kind of take a lot of things for granted. But when we stop and we take a look at what we're actually doing, then some amazing things happen. Not the least of which is the one that you just pointed out in your own experience, which is when we get together to talk about what we're about and what we're doing and how we're doing it, yes, fellowship occurs.
Yeah.
But not only does it create fellowship, it also creates awareness.
Yeah.
And that was the primary, I think, effort of last year's work, was to become more aware, to take a look at ourselves in the mirror.
Right.
And sometimes when you look at yourself in the mirror, you see something wonderful.
Yeah.
And some other times you start to see the wrinkles, and you start to see the aging, and you start to see all of those kinds of things that make you stop and say, wow, when did that happen?
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So we looked at what was happening in the parishes. When you read things like over 600,000 hours of work, of service, that people have contributed to the life of this church. And that's only a portion of it. Even that is only a portion.
Yeah.
People began to identify what they would probably not even observe if we hadn't asked them to.
Right. Yeah.
They've observed that they're actually doing things that are ministries.
Right.
being
Yes.
able to recognize certain things as ministries. And they're ministries because they're done in the name of the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
They're done in the name of the church.
Mm-hmm.
All of that has brought out our strengths.
Mm-hmm.
One of the observations that I also made, which I found quite telling, I guess I didn't really need the statistics to tell me that, and maybe parishioners didn't need it either, but it confirmed the reality that our church is an aging population.
Right.
So when you see that, something like 52, 54% of our communities of faith are over 65,
Right.
well, that raises a bunch of questions.
Uh-huh.
And what does that mean? And how do you become a missionary, disciple, which is what Pope Francis is calling us
Right.
to,
Yeah.
when you're
Spreading
65?
outwards. Yeah. Right.
When you're looking to retire, or when you're looking to go off on
Right.
vacation
Yep.
someplace, right?
Yep.
I've had those questions myself.
Yeah.
So we've observed that. We've observed the fact that young people are not prominently evident in our communities.
Uh-huh.
Is it because they don't have anything to offer? Is it because we don't have anything to offer them?
Right.
So that becomes a challenge to try to address as we move along in our pastoral planning.
Mm-hmm.
So lots of things have happened, and hopefully, as we observe all of these things, we can begin to take a look at how we translate into attainable goals
Right.
some of the necessary actions around community, around, mission last year, community this year, and around formation, particularly formation of leaders.
Right.
So those are some of the things that I've observed. There's a lot more, and maybe when we get together in October in our regional meetings, people will have an opportunity to take a look at what they discovered
Right.
in their parishes.
Right. So even more new things will come out
Yeah.
then. Yeah. So having seen where we've been, I guess my next question is, where are we right now? We have this kind of large, as you said, amazing sea of data. And that was something that blew me away when we were even just in our one parish at St. Mary's looking at this process at the cathedral. Just seeing all those hours, seeing all those people, seeing everything that's involved, seeing what isn't there, what is there, and so on. So lots of questions come up in terms of where we're at now. And I was interested to hear what questions are arising for you about that, and sort of what you're seeing in particular when you're looking in that mirror at all of us lined up in it.
Well, at the heart of all of this, desire for transformation, for rebuilding our church, for revitalizing our communities, for me, there's a vision. There's a vision of a new church.
Right.
And so when I look at all of what we've inherited and what we have, one of the questions that I often ask myself is, perhaps I have the vision, but does anybody else share it?
Right.
So one of
Big
my
deal.
questions about some of the questions that have arisen is related to that. Are the people of our church, are there sufficient numbers there who share the vision and who share the desire for a new, revitalized community of faith that fits our times?
Right.
Often the questions that I get asked when I travel around, people are always very preoccupied by things like, well, are you here because you're going to close our church?
Right.
They're worried about the building. They're worried about trying to maintain
Right.
things that they've inherited from the past.
Right.
Well, I also am concerned with maintaining what I've inherited, but there are some things that are worth maintaining, and there are some things that are absolutely necessary to let go. So some of the questions that I have is, will our parishioners see clearly what needs to be retained and what needs to be let go if we're going to become missionaries of the gospel for the 21st century in this part of the world?
Right. And how do you sort the wheat from the chaff in that regard, right?
That's right,
yeah.
because everyone, of course, is committed to certain things.
Yeah.
And, of course, it's important. This church was put up in such and such a time, or
Yeah.
this was a gift from my grandmother, or this, all of those things are important.
Yeah.
But our church has to move on. And so one of the statistics that I've just talked about is, the aging population. Another reality is that we no longer have the clergy that we had. We no longer have the religious that we had.
Right.
They were the missionaries.
Yeah.
They were the ones who came along and did all sorts of things in the church of another time and place.
Everyone was relying on them for that. Yeah.
And so we just counted on that, and we consider that to be the norm.
Right.
Well, frankly, right now, I'm at the bottom of the barrel here when it comes to providing human resources. So are there leaders in our respective parishes right now who can take up the mantle of responsibility, who are going to accept to become not only disciples, which means to follow the Lord because you're really convinced, but who will be ready and willing to accept the mission of going out to others, which is what makes an apostle an apostle. So are there people in our communities right now, even though they may be 65 years old?
Right. They've got a lot of experience behind them, if so.
Exactly
Yeah.
the point.
Yeah.
If you're 65, you're not old, you're an elder.
Absolutely.
And, that makes me think that priests, the original title, is elder.
Oh, that's really
Presbyter
Presbyter.
means elder.
Right.
So there are elders in our communities
Right.
who can bring to the community their wisdom. How many people in our parishes know something about our history, who know something about church doctrine or philosophy, or there's a wealth of information and knowledge and experience in the elders of our communities.
Absolutely.
Does any parish know what that actually is? See, that's the kind of question. And that's what I'm hoping in this coming year, as we prepare ourselves, as we equip ourselves to move into the future with the resources that we have, that we can actually go out and identify further what our strengths are,
Right.
and who's available. I think we need leaders for our times. And if we don't have the number of priests that we used to have, I don't think that's happened by accident. But we need to be able to read what that means and what the Lord is trying to tell us. And that's why part of the question, Lord, where are you going with all this?
Right.
And it's perhaps in a different place than some of us might have thought.
Mm.
So I have lots of questions. Are you with me or not?
Right.
Do you have something to offer?
Yeah.
Are you willing to give it a shot and offer it to help create a new generation of followers of Christ? Those are the things that I would hope people would look at in our coming year.
And I think that, you know, everything you've just said, Your Grace, just really carries right into the next question that I wanted to ask, which is how do we move forward? What's next? What's coming ahead of us? And how can we move forward in a positive way into the next aspect, the next stage of our journey, we might say?
Well, I think that's a practical question.
Right.
At least that's how I'm hearing it.
Yeah.
And as I ponder your question, I'm looking at really what are we going to do in the next year that's ahead of us? What's the focus of our pastoral year that's being initiated even with this conversation? And I think I see things happening in 4 moments, let's call it that way. I don't want to put specific dates on it, but 4 moments. The first moment is what's happening between now and Christmas. So in a sense, liturgically, it's the Advent period. It's our preparation for Christ's being born. But in terms of what we're trying to do with the pastoral letter and with our pastoral planning, I see this particular piece of our time frame as an opportunity to build our teams in the parishes. So that I would hope that during this time, every parish will identify who its key leaders are, and there are in every parish key leaders. I would also hope that the parishes would be able to identify some new faces, some new blood, who can bring some new perspectives on where we're going. So to build the team that's necessary for the pastoral planning. Identify, form how? Well, in the old days, when we counted on priests and brothers and sisters, and they would all be shipped off to a seminary.
Right.
Well, we don't have a seminary anymore.
Right.
The seminary, the place of formation, is right there in the midst of our community. So to form these leaders within our communities by drawing on its resources, by drawing on the resources of the Archdiocese or whoever we will have available to us to help form the leadership, but to form them in what? Leadership means taking people from one place to another.
Right.
But
Lord,
you need to know
where
you're going.
Yeah.
Back to the question.
Yes.
Lord, where are you going? So we need to bring some of these people during this first phase together to consider together the question, Lord, where are you going? Are we ready to go there? What do we have to be able to equip us and fit us for the journey? And all of that, for me, means creating opportunities for people to be grasped by the vision of the gospel. Being a Catholic does not mean going to church. Being a Catholic means being church. Being church, it means following Christ every day. I read once a book which was entitled, "What do you do the other 6 days?" And yes, what do we do the other 6 days? And what do we expect our church and our parishes particularly to embody as its primary experience? So the first phase, identify, form, and prepare the leadership. The second phase for the coming year is from January to Ash Wednesday. That's the period where the leadership comes together and appropriates for themselves the material that we've received, the statistics, the information, the strengths and the weaknesses, so that people in each parish can begin to see how that fits for their particular community and what it's saying to them as ways forward. So during that period of time, you begin to sort of chart the objectives, the goals, the things that are important for this community.
So it's very practical in that way, thinking about where are we going.
So that as you establish some of those observed goals or observed directions, then you can go to the third phase, which is from Ash Wednesday to Easter Sunday. Now, what do we do during Lent? Well, everybody knows that Lent is a time of penance, so this isn't going to be any different. The penance in this instance
Working on
means,
statistics.
it means working on statistics. It means working on observing where the strengths are, but it also means observing where the weaknesses are, or where the things are that need to be let go.
Right,
In Lent, we all want to lose fat.
right. Self-examination. Yeah.
Right, self-examination is all part of the exercise. But at the heart of that 40 days, the point spiritually is to get us in a discipleship mode. Well, the leadership has hopefully acquired some training, has acquired some direction. Now they're doing this for the benefit of the community.
Right.
So it's how does each parish in each region develop a Lenten program of reform and of renewal
Right.
for itself, which may involve some difficult realities. What do we need to let go? I mean, what constitutes a viable parish? What if you discover that you're not even alive?
Very difficult.
Well, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
And what is it that you would identify, for instance, as the essential elements for a dynamic and living Christian community? What would come to your mind spontaneously?
Following the gospel, definitely, but also, being part of the growth of the gospel and the sharing of the gospel to, new people, new generations, etc.
So generating new life
Yes.
is part of the community.
Yeah.
And if the community, for instance, hasn't had a baptism in 20 years,
Right.
well, where's the generativity?
Right.
You know? If all you've done is buried people, what's that telling you? You see, those are the hard pieces of looking
hard.
at things
Yeah.
realistically.
Yeah.
And what do we do when we don't have enough priests to go around and we're there, right? Does that mean that as a Catholic Church we disappear because we haven't got enough priests to keep up what we had in 1950? Hard points. So during the Lenten season, a program of reform is what is the heart of that experience, both spiritually and in terms of pastoral planning.
Right.
So in a way, I've put it this way, we have 40 days to get us from here to there. And that takes us to resurrection.
Yeah.
So what's the nature of resurrection? If we revitalize our communities, what would make our community visibly a living and dynamic community? Spreading the gospel, being alive, as you pointed out, that would certainly be a very good symptom of a community that's alive.
Right.
But I would like to suggest that this year in particular, the Holy Father has given us a clue as to what the primary experience needs to be, and that's mercy. So while we're looking at all these statistics, and while we're looking at structures, and while we're looking at all the things we need to let go and or what we hang on to,
Right.
the central question is, what are people experiencing?
Right.
So when people walk into our church,
Right.
what do they feel? Do they feel welcomed? Do they feel accepted? Do they feel judged?
Compassion
What do they
lack.
feel compassion
Yeah.
or not?
Yeah.
Mercy becomes the expression of the primary experience of the gospel. Pope Francis is asking us to go into this very, very deeply in this coming year. And we're going to be working that angle of this pastoral plan. So, and why do I make the connection with resurrection? Because mercy produces reconciliation. It produces joy. It brings about new possibilities and second chances. And when that happens, that is new life.
Right.
That's resurrection.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And once you've got resurrection and you've got some of that joy of the gospel
Yeah.
floating around in you and in the community that you are a part, it's going to naturally want to express itself.
It's got that energy. It's got that sort of refreshed
Yeah, you can't keep it to
spirit.
yourself.
Yeah.
So you got to go out. You've got to go into the world and you got to make an effort.
Yeah.
Well, that's Pentecost. And so Pentecost is experiencing the power of the Spirit that comes anew on our faith communities. And for our purposes as a Church of Halifax-Yarmouth, we're going to bring all the fruit of this year's work together at our Assembly of the People of God,
Right.
which this year will take place around Pentecost. That's where we will see, hopefully, the fruit of the work that takes place as a result of team building, as a result of reflecting on the specific goals and objectives, on the program of reform that's lived through in Lent and lived out as an experience of love and mercy. So that's a long answer to your question, but I think those are the next steps.
That gives us a real sense of the journey. Thank you. Yeah. I wonder then, Your Grace, how you would, sometimes something that comes up in, when we're in the midst of these processes, and I've definitely, heard people say this, is, well, haven't we done lots of this kind of thing? We've had various programs within all of our various churches. What's different about this? Aren't we already kind of familiar with these processes of transformation? But it seems to me that what you're describing is something that is a little bit different, and I wondered if you could say a bit about that.
Well, a program is an external agency. When we buy a program, we buy a product.
Right. Stick it into the computer.
Yeah, and we expect then the product to shape us.
Right.
And what I'm talking about is not that. There may be some programmatic dimensions, of course. We have to make some decisions about this or that, and there's only so many ways in which you can use a computer, right?
Right.
So there are some programmatic elements to what we're doing. But it's not a program because we're not buying something that someone else invented and that we're going to conform ourselves to.
Right.
All of this is driven from coming together in prayer. It means it's coming out of our own reflection and our own experience of the gospel.
Right.
And what we're putting together is what we have discerned together as essential. So I don't expect people in Yarmouth to be doing exactly the same thing as people in Amherst or people in downtown Halifax, for that matter.
Right.
What we're doing here is an attempt to be respectful of people's individualities and recognizing those elements that are specific to, let's say, a rural community as opposed to an urban community. A program doesn't necessarily do that. It allows for it if you have the brains and if you have the skills and if you have the interest to adapt a program to your situation.
Right.
But a program in and of itself is an instrument. We're not asking people to conform to an instrument. We're asking people to become the instrument, to become the sacrament of transformation.
Right.
That's the difference as I see it.
Yeah, the prayer of St. Francis there, make me an instrument of your peace, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, no program is going to do that.
Right. It's not gonna. It's gonna be just prodding you as opposed to having it coming from within. Yeah.
And that line from St. Francis clearly indicates that I cannot be an instrument of peace if I don't have peace within me.
Right.
When I have been myself changed, then somehow I will have within me the kinds of elements necessary that would make an impact on somebody else.
Right. Yeah. And your emphasis on prayer a few minutes ago and discernment makes a lot of sense with that too, doesn't it? Where we need to find the mercy, to accept mercy, to find mercy in ourselves, to give mercy to others.
Well, that's right. In this Holy Year of Mercy, the Holy Father is wanting us to be compassionate. He's asking us to open our doors. To open our doors means welcome people, let them come in, give them an opportunity to experience what everyone wants to experience somewhere in our hearts, which is that somebody cares, that God cares. Well, if God cares, can we as children of God demonstrate a similar kind of caring? If we receive mercy, and we have all been recipients of that, if we really think about it, then how are we becoming communicators of mercy, instruments of mercy? Mercy received means mercy shared. And at the heart of the Christian community, that's what makes the difference. It's not how many Christmas baskets you put out, but how many Christmas baskets you put out for the right reason, which is because you care. That makes the difference. So yeah, there's a difference between a program and a journey of reform and renewal. That's why one of my first questions was, is there anyone that's following me?
Right.
Is there anybody that's capturing the vision? Because without that, then we fall into the simply a bunch of things to accomplish.
Checking off boxes rather than being transformed. Yeah.
Now, checking off boxes is helpful if it's helpful. If it's not helpful, then we're just wasting our times or spinning our wheels. And I would hope that we're not doing that. So what we're going to do this year, hopefully, is create an opportunity for as many parishioners as possible to prepare themselves for the journey that is before us. And we are hoping to go on at least a minimum of a 3-year journey after this. But with the necessary re-equipping of ourselves for that journey. So I pray about that, and I hope that people are joining me along with us.
So the last question, thank you for all your time, Your Grace. The last question that I wanted to ask you was really about sort of inspiration for this journey. What are your dreams and hopes for where we're going to go? Are there particular perhaps passages of the Scripture or moments in the Word of God that are helping to inspire you and might help to inspire us as we go forward?
Yeah. You know, when you ask me about my dreams, I guess one of the things that comes to mind is, you know, we've all had dreams somewhere along the line. And dreams, you know, when I first became a priest and now that I'm a bishop, I mean, there's a lot of things that have been let go. But something remains. And the part that remains and that keeps me moving along is the dream of a renewed church. I'm a product of Vatican II. And after Vatican II, there was great enthusiasm. And we thought that that new church was going to happen overnight. In reality, it's 50 years later, and we haven't even begun to see some of that happen. But that dream is still there. When I came here to Halifax, I may have said this before, I didn't expect to be appointed bishop or archbishop of any place. I was in Montreal, I was vicar general there, I did what I had to do, and I had a good job. And I really thought I would simply continue in that role. Then I was asked to come here, and when that was presented to me, I realized that I was being given an opportunity that, yes, touched the dream that I had. And when I arrived, I discovered that there were some people here with whom I felt at home and who shared some of the things that I was trying to reflect on and do. And that's happening. That's happening. And so my dream for this church is that it becomes a viable, attractive, engaging church for a new generation. Otherwise, there's no life. Right? So those are some of the things that I have in mind in terms of what my dreams are. There are days when I'm not sure if I'm experiencing a dream or a nightmare.
Right.
But I think truly the dream is there. And you know that question that I asked that was the basis for the pastoral letter, you know, Lord, where are you going? I mean, that came from prayer and reflection and struggle. And it surfaced in me, and I don't think it surfaced in me simply because it happened accidentally. I think it was some form of grace that helped me to see that the vision needed to be held up. And so when Peter asks Jesus, Lord, where are you going? And Jesus answers back, I'm going back into the city so that I can be crucified again. That sounds harsh, but it's in reality the necessary process for renewal to happen. So I'm still here. And related to that story and related to that experience, which I kind of shared personally, I would say the passage that speaks to me is the passage from St. Luke's Gospel, I think, the story of the two disciples on the road to Emmaus. They were disappointed. They were down. They thought they had lost it all. They thought that everything that they had signed up for had fallen apart. But they had to go back home, in a sense, to go to that journey so that they can discover Christ that was walking along with them. And as they discovered the presence of Christ again, this time the risen Christ, they were able to go back to Jerusalem. And if I remember one of the translations, it says they got up in the middle of the night and they went back to Jerusalem.
Yeah.
That tells me even in the darkest time, when you have found the Lord again, you can then go back and do it again.
We've got that energy, and they say our hearts burned within us when he spoke to us. Yeah.
And I wish that were the experience of more and more of our parishioners, to experience the burning of our hearts because we have encountered the Lord.
Thank you so much, Your Grace. That's I feel like I've learned a lot about where we've been and where we're going thanks to this conversation.
Yeah, thanks for coming today, and I hope all of our parishioners will find meaning and support in this conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.